Welcome to Laurier's Teaching Excellence Conversation Series. I'm Deborah Van Eyneton, Academic Director of Teaching Excellence and Innovation at Wilfrid Laurier University. And today I'm with Lucy Luccisano from Laurier's Sociology Department, who received the 2025 Excellence in Internationalization Award. For over 2 decades, Lucy has redefined what internationalization can mean in higher education, moving it beyond travel and toward deep, transformative engagement across borders, cultures, and communities. Lucy is a co-founder of Laurier's North American Studies program and has designed and led experiential exchanges, virtual classrooms, and collaborative partnerships with institutions in Mexico and the United States. Her cross-border mobility programs have empowered students to develop global perspectives, diverse networks, and lifelong connections. And I'm so excited to talk with her today. Lucy, thank you so much for joining me here today.
I'm looking forward to this interview.
So in your dossier, you start off by really laying out how a single cross-cultural learning experience changed your life as a student, the Dominican Republic experience that you participate in. Can you talk about how that experience really shaped your passion for global education?
I think with that one experience, that was a complete game changer in my life. I went on this trip. It was organized by the left wing of the Catholic Church Youth Corps called the Dominican Republic Experience. It was inspired by liberation theology. And it was about going to the Dominican Republic to have, there was in-class instruction, but there was also a family placement. In that space of traveling with other young people across Canada, everything became more confused, blurry, and yet there was a clarity that I never had. And the clarity was learning about all these pieces, social inequality, gender inequality, unionism, political parties.
Because you were right there in families,
We were there.
right? Living with poor families and going to like union movement gatherings, et cetera,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
We were in spaces where social justice activities was being crafted.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we spent all our lives, at least I did, within the institution, going and being in a place, in a space where people lived, where families lived, where policy decisions impacted lives. You saw that. I mean, it was only a 6-week trip, but it was intense. And it was a lot of learning. And it's where the academic concepts came alive.
Yeah, because you talk about how you went back home and then you were like, okay, now I can relate to this curriculum that I'm studying, right? Now this is meaningful for me.
It was meaningful, and you saw how it was lived. It was something that, as university students, you don't, at least in my generation, you didn't see it being lived inside the classroom.
Yeah.
Everything changed. Everything changed. So
right. So the trajectory of your focus.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And you talk about Gutierrez and the impact on you. Like, so that's a liberation theology approach that you were, seeing on the ground. This is what it looks like. And then you followed it up with several trips, right? In Latin America.
Yeah, like after the Dominican Republic experience, I did my MA work in Peru,
Yep.
then my PhD work in Mexico. There were many different ways in which that experience, the original experience, the experience of being in the Dominican Republic always followed.
Yeah.
And it was just having a focus on critical justice, social justice, feminism, and how that gets played out or doesn't get played out in different spaces.
So I wonder if I can follow that up, because there's this wonderful phrasing in your dossier where you talk about your teaching journey as a story of collaboration, vision, empathy, and risk-taking, right? Can you talk about that a little bit?
I mean, if I reflect on, even from the Dominican Republic experience, it was collaborative.
Yeah.
It was a group of young Canadians across Canada led by other young Canadians going on this trip. So there was a lot of collaboration with the the Canadian arm of it, but also the folks in the Dominican Republic who made it happen.
Mhm.
Our leaders uh, in the program became our teachers, and the
Mhm.
teachers were everywhere. And I think when we think about international education, the only way to do it is through collaboration, and the more collaboration, like the stronger the experience for students, the stronger the program. And here at Laurier, I think what is really important is that's our story at Laurier. The
That's
story.
right, because you've helped lead 2 North American mobility programs, plus another international education experience. So, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about collaboration in that context,
Yep.
because those were significant programs that brought, $400,000 to Laurier to support global education. You had how many students that actually participated? Something like,
77.
yeah, in total. That's amazing.
Yeah, but that story is a story of how we all work together.
Yeah,
And I worked with you and Kevin Spooner and David Doherty and Peter Donahue, who actually brought these ideas
that's
to
right.
us about
Yep.
we should do mobility. We should do a North American mobility grant. We need to get involved. And it didn't take us long to think this is what we should do, because at the time, parallel to this, you and others working with you launched the North American Studies program. And the strength of all of this was how we collaborated with each other at Laurier. And that's an important story that other institutions don't have.
Mhm.
And I think what makes us exceptional is how we not only cross borders, but we cross disciplines, we cross the hallway, we cross our buildings to come together to work with each other to make these opportunities available, to apply for these opportunities, but also to make them available for students so they can go on exchange and have these really incredible transformative
Mhm.
intercultural experiences.
And the North American Mobility Program was intended to create, strong linkages between post-secondary institutions in Canada, the US, and Mexico, right? So, you have managed to build long-term partnerships between our institutions and institutions in the US and Mexico. So how do you build that trust and collaboration across borders?
I think we learned a lot from the first North American Mobility Grant in higher education. That was 2006 to 2010,
Yep.
and I think that's when we learned, and the learning curve was deep, but we were younger. We did it.
Yep.
We were excited by it,
Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
liked working with each other, and it was fun. And I think that's a really important piece of it. There's an excitement when you do international work. There's an excitement when you work with people who share the same norms and the same values that you have, and really want to see s- these opportunities become available for students. And it was work, but it was also a lot of fun. And I think that's part of what was unique about what we were doing. And I think that's what made it successful. We saw this as a way of not only learning about how to do these programs, but also learning about ourselves, working together with others,
Yeah. And building community, right?
building
And
community.
then that transfers to students. Students are, excited because we're excited, right? And
Yeah,
getting them out to
yeah.
experience education in these other places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first one, we learned a lot. The second one that Kevin and Spooner and I applied for in 2010, we had new partners. So it was 3 different countries, 6 university partners, 2 in Canada, 2 in the US, 2 in Mexico. We took the lead on that, and we had learned how to do it, and how to take leadership in this was something that didn't fall from the sky. We learned how to do it through the first North American Mobility Grant, but we worked with Laurier International. We worked across the university. We worked with the Faculty of Arts. We worked with the presidents of every time we applied for a grant. Max Blau and then Deb McClatchy, super supportive. Like
Yeah.
really were
Yeah.
supportive of what we were doing. So we were in a unique place where we wanted to do it. We had energy. We were being supported, and we were building connections with each other institutionally, but also across borders.
Mhm.
And so we received the second grant, and the second grant was about misperceptions and perceptions. And that was really important because I think our students have these ideas about what Americans are and have these ideas about what Mexicans are. But when they go on exchange, their understanding shifts a lot.
Yeah.
And they learn so much. Even going to Georgia Southern, which students thought wouldn't be that different, was significantly different for them in terms of how they imagined the place, how they imagined the people, and the connections they made. And these connections are really key to helping you think through all sorts of, stereotypes,
Mhm.
how we see each other, how we relate to each other. I mean, we're living in a very polarized world right now.
Mhm.
And I think what I'd love to see is the North American mobility grants. They no longer exist because they were really, really well funded. And the last one was 2014.
Yeah.
But if there was ever a time to bring them back, it's now because we're not talking to each other.
No.
And we
Yeah.
need more of these opportunities for all of us to talk to each other and to travel.
So the third one that you led was the Michigan State University Laurier Exchange, which has really been praised for its impact on students that faced financial or social barriers to participation. So can you talk a little bit about how you structured that experience to promote accessibility and make it meaningful for students who did face barriers?
We received that grant in 2019. Then the world shut down. And
Oh, that's right.
so we were
Yes.
only
Right.
able
Yes.
to bring it to light, like to make it happen in 2023. We had this amazing partner at Michigan State University, Director of Canadian Studies, Rebecca Malouin.
Hmm.
And it was really a privilege to work with her because what we did is we had this money. It wasn't one of the bigger grants. It was actually one of the smaller grants we received, but we had this money and we decided we're going to travel together. It wasn't going to be an individual student experience. It was going to be a group experience. So
Oh, that's fun. That's community
14,
building. Yeah.
14 students from North American Studies, political science, sociology, history, agreed to go on this trip. It was fully funded. And we traveled together by bus. It was 2 days, one overnight. We had conversations in the bus. We hit the ground running. And as soon as we arrived, we ended up in a lecture on US politics. And it was 2023. Because there was two parts to the trip. The first part was attending Michigan State University. So for almost everyone on that trip, this was the first time for the students, the first time on an American university. What was unique about this trip, and this was my favorite trip, my most favorite trip,
Mm.
because it was the faculty, staff traveling, and students. So we had everyone on this trip, and we had incredible conversations and just a lot of time where we really connected. So the first part, going to the university, was just like incredible. Like, wow, look at these buildings, look at the space. The sun was shining. You couldn't ask for a more perfect day
Yeah.
and a more perfect host. The second day is we went to Flint, Michigan.
Mm.
And here the community was involved. And the community took us to show us what does Flint look like in the aftermath of the water crisis,
Yeah.
also the economic devastation. And what we were invited to see was these murals that came up. These murals on Martin Luther King and, walking arm in arm with civil rights activists. And it was just powerful. It was powerful. I mean, I think we were all in tears at some point. And then it allowed us to have different kind of conversations on the way home. What does this mean? What are the complexities at play here? And different students felt this differently, right? It impacts you differently and depends on your social location.
Hmm.
So we had really important conversations about that. And I think that for me is where the model should be. I think international exchanges for individuals is fantastic, but there's something really special about traveling as a group,
Yeah.
having it fully funded,
Yeah.
and keeping it short because students have jobs.
Yep. They have lives.
They have lives, they have jobs, they're busy. Sometimes students are just afraid to go on exchange. on their own.
Can we draw that out a little bit? Because what kind of changes have you seen in students after they have these experiences, after they go off to, Mexico, Jalapa, or, or Georgia Southern, or, all the institutions where we had partnerships? What kind of changes do you see in them?
Nothing we could do in our classrooms could change them as much as the experience changes them. They're taking risks, right?
That's a big one.
They're taking risks. They're going on
Yeah.
exchange.
Yep.
They're
It's hard to do that too. It's hard to put your life on hold and go to a completely different institution for a term.
and while some students can do it, other students can't do it. It's scary, right? You're getting on a plane and then you land. Now what?
Now what? Exactly.
There's a different way that students talk to you or talk to me and talk to each other after having that experience. I think it clarifies for them the careers they want and how they want to be in that career, right? So if they want to be teachers, there's a particular way they want to be a teacher. If they want to be a lawyer or a probation officer, it makes them think differently about the position. I think it gives them greater empathy in how they see life and work and struggles, and a lot of them come back with what we would call the sociological imagination. And with the sociological imagination, they start to understand individuals and society. And it's not that they become Marxists, because they don't become Marxists, but they see the ways in which structures impact lives, and they impact lives deeply. It's so much different before the pandemic, right? Paulo Freire talks about, we need to approach our teaching with love and compassion and empathy for our students. I've become just as concerned about how to connect with students where they are and what I'm doing in the classroom. So as, I think if I saw what I was doing 15 years ago, it was jam-packed with information. If you look at what I'm doing today, it's a lot less information.
Conveying information. Yeah.
But more how to do stuff. What are the
Yeah.
skills?
Yeah.
How do we do this? Because students start at different points. And while we were always
they
paying
sure do.
attention to that, the pandemic has made things a lot more complicated, not for all students, but for some students. It's changed families, it's changed lives, it's changed individuals, and there's more care that is needed now in the classroom.
I really liked your sort of your self-reflection in the dossier, where you were saying when you started teaching, you realized you were succeeding in opening students' eyes to what was going on around them in society, but that they were so depressed after. So then you were like, okay, I need to do something different. I need to give them a sense of purpose and a sense of personal agency, personal efficacy. Okay, so if this is the way things are, we can change that, right?
Yeah.
And so that kind of theme really permeates your teaching, your work in these exchange global education programs, right? Is this giving students, not only opening up their eyes to what is going on around them, but giving them a sense of agency. Here's how I can contribute. Here's what my role is, right? So maybe I want to do the, as you said, the same career, I want to do, but, to use your words, here's who I want to be when I, perform that function, right?
Yeah.
Be that professional. What has been the role of Indigenous and equity-focused partnerships in your internationalization work? Because that's been another stream of activity for you, right? Is pushing on that, again, pushing on barriers and opening up global education to groups that might not be sort of moving around and traveling.
And a lot of these mobility grants, we learned a lot. Like there was always lessons learned. How would we do something
Differently next
differently?
time. Yes.
Kevin Spooner and I, when we were thinking about like the next grant, which was in 2018, we were thinking about, well, we applied to the 100 Strong in the Americas program.
Yeah.
And it was very restrictive in terms of who we could partner with. So there were a number of American universities or other universities, and we wanted to go with a U.S. school. And we really thought, what's been missing? What was missing is Indigenous students and mobility.
Mm-hmm.
So we worked closely with Jean Becker
Mm-hmm.
and the Indigenous office. We wanted to get their sense of, should we do this? And if we did it, how should we do it?
Mm-hmm.
So the whole planning always involved Jean and Erin Hodson, Melissa Ireland at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and Phyllis Power, of course. And there was many pieces to think through. And you, unlike other students that we were just sending them overseas, and they went, it's different for Indigenous students. And this is what we learned with working with Jean, that we need to have a school that had strong support systems and networks for the students that would travel. Even though the students, we worked with Syracuse University and we worked with Haudenosaunee.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kept within like the tradition of Haudenosaunee, but it was still a lot of challenges to mobility. Like we went through, what are the supports they need? And so on the one hand, we applied, we were successful in receiving the monies. I think 3 students did travel to Syracuse, but we received no students from Syracuse.
Mm-hmm.
So it made us pause to think, well,
How do we do this?
how do we do this?
Yeah.
And learning to see what are the challenges is also an important part of the process, because sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And then you really have to sit down. We had a lot of conversations about why it didn't work as well as we thought it could work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So those were important pieces.
I wonder if I can follow up on that just by asking about how you prepare students to engage in international education, right? Just before you're going to send them off. Certainly, you were talking about some of the challenges in developing programs that include Indigenous students, right? And then preparing them to undertake that international experience. But even more generally, how do you prepare students? Because I find that they're perhaps less prepared to head off onto a plane and a foreign context and engage in daily life, let alone go to school and succeed.
This is, I think, what makes Laurier really unique.
Yeah.
What we learned with these mobility grants was how well we do things here,
Mm-hmm.
how well we work with each other, and that's really important. We're a medium-sized university, but we know each other. We work with each other, and when we have these international grants, we work with Laurier International, and Laurier International prepares these students for travel. We can't do that work.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk to students, but Laurier International has a process, through Phyllis Power, Peter Donahue, and their team. They prepare students for these experiences. You can't do it without them. And I think that's why we were successful on our end to send Indigenous students. I don't think those units were talking to each other at Syracuse
I was
the way
gonna
we
say
were talking
back
to
to
each
the
other.
collaboration bit, right?
We were talking to
yeah.
we were working, we were, working, applying for these grants, thinking about all the particular things that we should think about. We didn't get that sense that that was happening at different universities.
Right.
We
Right.
were always working together.
As a team.
We were a team. We were a team, and we worked together. We collaborated. We checked in with each other. And I think for international education, for these experiences that you hope will be transformative for students' lives, all the pieces have to be there. And I am really happy to say that with you and with others, we kind of grew up together in this process. We grew up together. We know what works, and we know how to get there. And I think we all learned together on how to do this.
And we've got these professional support units here at Laurier.
Without them, you can't do it.
What they're doing.
And so you have Laurier International, which is incredible with the work that they do. But then we also have study skills services, which I can't do teaching without them. Right? They know how to come in and work with students, particularly now where the student culture is not for all students, but for many students, being at school is difficult.
So then what advice would you actually give to others who are starting down this road of trying to bring internationalization into their teaching? And your practice has been, not only do you move faculty and students out into the world, you bring the world into your classroom. I think faculty may not be aware of the myriad ways in which they can bring the world into their classroom. What are some of the ways in which that you've done that? And I know, for example, you've brought graduate students from Mexico here, from Latin America, guest speakers, etc. But maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, this is the whole piece around international abroad and international at
At
home.
home, yeah.
So you need
Yep.
the two. Bringing people into your classrooms is really an enriching experience for everyone,
Yeah.
right? And now we can do it with Zoom.
So I want to follow up
Yeah.
on that too, because
Yeah.
way before COVID,
Yeah.
you were already creating internationalization at home using the virtual space.
In 2010, when we applied for our second grant, we wanted to talk to our partners, and the work, the time, Carolyn Morrison, who just retired,
Yeah.
had to network with 6 universities, 3 different countries,
ICT people at all.
ICT at all different ends, different time zones.
Yeah.
It was a lot to get one meeting, and even the visual wasn't that clear, right? But we needed to talk to each other. We needed to be on board, on the same page to launch a grant that we were all implicated in, right? So we did that. But with Zoom, Zoom is so much better than Skype. Remember Skype?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
It's so much better. What we
Yeah.
used, and poor Kevin Spooner working with Adobe Connect, got us in the same room, but it was a lot of work. It's now never been easier to do international work, and I think we should do more of it. I think once you see people and you have conversations, that's what counts. That's what that's what
Connection.
matters.
It's connection.
It's the connections, and conversations are so important. Discussions are so important. So having guest speakers, like in the early days, I'd have guest speakers drive in from Toronto or from different places, come to the classroom. We'd have an honorarium of $50. But they would
Good lunch.
come, they would come and they would do it, and the
Yeah.
students would connect, and they would see real people doing real work of human rights
Yes.
activism, and what it meant to them, and how important it was to their lives. So these moments in the classroom also became transformative. Like one guest speaker can change your life. Having students come from Mexico and be students here was an enriching experience for me, because I learned so much. And having a student from UDLA, from Puebla, work on a Mexican human rights event that we had in 2021. I'm learning probably more than they're learning from me, because what they bring and their knowledge and what you hear about the place, the politics, the challenges, it's about their lives, and it's about what they see, and it's something that is really unique. So so we benefit. Like, it's not one way. Like, even the internationalism, even when our students go abroad, they come back and we get enriched, right? So it's not, and I think it's very much it's not this. It's a transformative politics, but for everyone. Like, I learn a lot every time. My learning about something deepens, or my ideas about something change. Oh, I thought it was this. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm probably wrong. So how and that's explained. So what we create is communities of practice. We create dialogue, we create conversations, which what made sense 10 years ago doesn't make sense now.
That's real global mentorship, because it's not only working with Laurier students who you're sending out and they're coming back, and as you say, they're enriching your own sort of teaching practice and experience. You have, Mexican graduate students coming here, having an experience that doubtless also changed their lives. Those connections endure. One of the things I think that you're particularly good at is your ability to make and then maintain over long periods of time relationships, right? It's relationship building, and then the community gets bigger and it gets stronger. If I were starting out fresh and I were saying, I want to bring global education into my classes, what would you say, what's a good starting point?
You need to go to Laurier International and talk to not only the directors, but all the different people in the office space. Get a sense of what happens in that space.
Yep. And what they're up to, what projects are ongoing.
Have conversations. Go to Student success services, ask them about their international students.
Hmm.
Ask them about what challenges they're seeing and what supports they have in place. Talk to people who've done this before, and
Like you.
Kevin or you. The biggest mistake you can make in this kind of teaching is to think you're going to do it by yourself. You can't do this by yourself. It
Yeah.
doesn't work, and it's not fun. And I think when you work with like-minded individuals, bigger things can happen. And there is great excitement in doing that. There is great energy because you come together and what you start to see is overlap in your ideas. You start to see overlap in what you want to do. And we have so many incredible field courses now at Laurier, right? There was just a trip that went to Costa Rica with global studies, and those are fantastic trips.
Hmm.
So talk to anyone who's done this kind of work. I think you need to spend the first 6 months just talking and learning and hearing, and then think about what you want to do, and then start to do it. I mean, like embassies have money, reaching out to embassies and figuring out how to do it. But also, if you can't do the big trip, there's also ways in terms of you can internationalize your classroom
Hmm.
in so many ways. I mean, Margaret and I worked closely together.
Hmm.
So we worked closely together because she was teaching
Margaret Walton Roberts.
Margaret
Yes.
Walton Roberts.
Yeah.
She was teaching a third year class in immigration. I was teaching a grad course on immigration, and we realized it was at the same time. So we worked together. We brought the students together. We were able to get we through funding. We brought in a lot of guest speakers, and at the end of the course, we had a migration symposium where the students could showcase the work that they did and their projects.
Amazing.
It was a sociology students, it was geography students, it was undergrads, it was grads, the space was here at Laurier, but the topics were international.
Hmm.
And what I think was important in that is how students could think about what are the solutions to social problems, right? And I think this is what we do in sociology and political science. These are the problems, but we also now give them the tools to start to think about, well, what are the solutions,
Hmm.
and how do you see yourself in the solution? What's your participation, and what can you bring to this?
There's been a wonderful symbiosis in your teaching sort of history, your teaching experience, where you've got things going on in the classroom that are, again, getting students to open their eyes to this, what's going on globally and their sense of agency and social responsibility. And then you've been doing these externally focused activities where you're sending students out and you're engaging with faculty and folks in other countries, and you're bringing grad students in. And then your research, which is also feeds, very nicely into this. And, I would say that it probably also got started when you went to the Dominican Republic with that very first experience, thinking about poverty and, solutions to this and the structural inequities and all of those various things. So what happens now? What would you like to do next? Is there anything else you want to try? Because you've been innovating in all three realms your whole career, right? So what's next on the horizon for you?
Well, this fall, we took students to Camp Sociology.
Okay.
So a donor gave us some money, and and so we used that money with Dana Sachak, Shannon Howes. We spent 2 nights, 3 days at a Camp Sociology where sociology students came, and we talked about all sorts of things. Like, we had fun, but we also talked about careers, and it was about connections. And so I think for me, what I'm thinking about a lot these days is I think how lonely students are.
Yeah. Yes.
This I've been thinking about this, and I think they were lonely before the pandemic, but I think that loneliness has deepened. And it's not just for young people. Old people are lonely, middle-aged people are lonely, young people are lonely, but there's something. Young people are lonely, but they're also thinking about their futures. They have great concerns about what
Yeah.
the future of work looks like for them. Where will they be? What's the economy going to look like? And so I think when you're worried about these things and then you're feeling lonely, things just get heavier. And the space for social connections is more and more important. I'd love to do more of the 2 days, one overnight, cross-border trips to the US when possible, or even someplace within Ontario,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Because it's about connecting with our students, but also thinking about big ideas. And I find those trips, they're actually a lot of fun, and students come alive in different ways. So I think what got me here was luck. So I went up to on the Dominican Republic experience. It was luck that someone suggested I do this. So I want to be more and more intentional about, because we need to be more intentional about creating more intentional opportunities for students, because luck, you can't count on luck, but we have to be here for the students in ways that help them start thinking about certain things and make space possible for them. So more of that. That's what I would like to do.
I think the faculty that come to Laurier and want to internationalize their teaching should just sit down with you for about an hour. They'll learn a lot. Thank you, Lucy, so much for joining me here today.
Thank you. It was fun.
My thanks to Lucy Luccisano for joining me today, and I hope you will join me for more conversations that celebrate exceptional teaching practices, explore diverse teaching philosophies, and discuss the future of higher education teaching and learning.